to talk to you about cat shit. I promise it's appropriate. And not just because it kind of looks great in big pink writing. I need to talk to you about cat shit because of this gentleman here. This is Clarence. He's not my cat, although that's something that's currently in negotiation between me and Clarence, because Clarence has feelings on this matter. I don't know who he belongs to. He lives mostly in my back garden and sometimes in my living room. He comes and goes as he pleases. He's quite neglected and he's quite damaged. He's not quite sure about human company. He's not quite sure whether or not he likes to be stroked. He's not quite sure whether or not he's scrounging for food or affection or play. He spends a really rather remarkable amount of time hiding up my chimney, which I didn't know was a possibility until one day when I didn't know he was in the house. He suddenly scooted out from inside the chimney. I don't know what he's finding up there, but he seems kind of very happy. And he's sort of all the things that you hope for in a cat, in that he's, a bit distant and a bit wild and a bit mercurial and a bit adorable and, generally a source of, I didn't do that. Generally a source of cat shit. So I love Clarence, if that is his name, and indeed if that is his gender, who knows. And I love him for all of those reasons, right? Because that's why we love cats. Wrong. That's not why we love cats. This is why we love cats, although everyone can correct me about this at the end. Toxoplasma gondii is a tiny organism, a protozoa technically, which is microscopic and very simple, but has a very complicated life. And its life is that it lives mostly in the tissue of small creatures, of things like mice. So if mice have become infected or become host to Toxoplasma gondii, they're full of this sort of little stuff. And that's fine. It doesn't really do the mice any harm. The Toxoplasma is happy enough. All we go. Except the Toxoplasma can live in the tissue of mice, but it can't breed in the tissue of mice. For reasons best known to itself, the only place it can breed is inside the lower intestine of a cat. So it is faced with a problem of how to get from the inside of a... I promise I didn't set this up to keep saying cat shit. So it's got to get from the mouse into the cat. And if it does that successfully, the stuff can then breed inside the cat's gut. It produces lots of things called oocysts, and they come out in the cat shit, and hopefully that then comes into contact with other mice, and the whole cycle can repeat itself. It's kind of a little bit baroque as a way to live your life, but it seems to work for Toxoplasma gondii. But that means that this organism has a better chance of succeeding if the mouse that it's in gets eaten by a cat. And consequently, it's evolved to have an effect on mice's brains that means that they no longer respond to the smell of cats as a fear trigger. So the mice that have this organism inside them are less frightened of cats and therefore more likely to get eaten so that the cat can eat them, so the stuff can get in the cat gut and come out the other end. Sorry, really sorry. Why would it stay on? That's a nice picture. Why would it stay on that? So that blows my mind. That's kind of incredible, because that's mind control, right? This thing, which you can only see with a microscope, which is so small that it lives inside cells. The reason that it doesn't do the mice any harm is that it doesn't trigger any immunological response because it's sitting inside a perfectly healthy cell, can control Clarence's mind. Except, because Clarence lives in my garden and I do a fair amount of gardening, it's not entirely impossible that I've come into contact with a little bit of what it is that Clarence produces in the course of doing that. And Toxoplasma gondii lives just as happily in human beings as it does in mice. And there's an amount of research evidence which suggests that it has the same impact on the human brain that it does on the mouse brain. So, in fact, although I think I love Clarence because he's adorable, it's really quite likely that I love Clarence because I'm infected with a tiny organism that suppresses my natural fear and disgust towards him, which in Clarence's case is moderately warranted because he's, slightly nasty. So this is by no means the only parasite. There are parasites that have host chains up to 8 or 9 animal chains long that they've got to get. It's kind of like some kind of crazy greatest race challenge they've got to get from, sheep to rabbit to the next thing to the next thing to the next thing. And in the course of doing that, a number of them exert influences on how their hosts behave. And the more that people, so the study of the effect of toxoplasmosis in humans is ongoing, and there's an amount of disagreement about what impact it has. There's an Australian study recently that says that if you have it, as well as being more attracted to cats, if you're a bloke, you're more likely to exhibit rule-breaking behaviour and be prone to jealousy. So if you're in the little Venn diagram of a jealous, rebellious cat lover, you're probably infected. Ladies, we have a slightly tougher row to hoe. We exhibit greater promiscuity, but also greater conscientiousness, which is quite a killer combination. So again, if that's your Venn diagram, there's a kind of likelihood that you're a carrier. And I think I wanted to talk about this partly because it's just amazing, but also because one of the things that games do is they change behavior. They're these little organisms, these little mechanisms that people become absorbed with, that then change how they behave. And that, to me, is what's fascinating about being a game designer. Both in terms of game rule sets being somewhere where I can express things that I'm interested in or curious about in terms of the human condition and human behavior, but also then in seeing how they impact on the people that they play them and what things they make them do that they wouldn't otherwise do, or things that they reveal about themselves. And I think when we're talking about interactive cat shit, I'm going to do this with all my presentations from now on. Cheapest but most effective laugh ever. It's not really any better standing in front of that, is it? When you're talking about interactive work, you're always talking about human behavior, because that's always the big unknown, is you're plugging into a bunch of people who are going to do things that you don't expect. And I think you need to be able to create things that have that ethos at heart to do it successfully. So one of the things I'm really keen to explore over the course of this is how we make things that change how people behave, hopefully in a slightly more sanitary way than the one I've just outlined.